Everyone, like to welcome you to the September 17th, 2024 council meeting. We have one councillor away with notice, which is Councillor Bigger, and Reeve Link is online and is using eScribe, so we'll be using the eScribe process. I'll call the meeting in the order. Council is conducting the meeting in person and via conference call in accordance with Municipal Government Act Section 199. Council chambers is open for public attendance in person. However, councillors and members of the public may still join meetings remotely using our current teleconference process. If you have submitted a comment request that has been received by administration, the chair will call upon you at the appropriate time. If the meeting is recessed, callers will be put on hold until the meeting reconvenes, with the exception at noon, where callers will be asked to call back in. This helps with the quality of the call. Please note this meeting is being recorded and may be uploaded to our website and/or social media. To eliminate background noise, please mute your phone during the meeting. We also ask attendees to mute their devices to reduce disruptions in this meeting. Everyone has the right to be present at council meetings and council committee meetings. Any attendees that are considered disruptive to the progression of this meeting may be removed at the discretion of the chair as per Municipal Government Act 1, Section 198. Thank you for your cooperation and understanding. Being that we have one councillor participating remotely, I will do a roll call. Councillor Priest?
I'm here.
Councillor Eichert?
Present.
I'm here. Councillor Kester?
Present.
And Councillor Larson?
Present.
Reeve Link?
Good morning, everybody.
Okay, we have an agenda before us. Is there any additions or deletions? Go ahead.
There's an item missing from the agenda. September 9th, 2024, we received correspondence from a ratepayer, very similar to the one that was put on the agenda for the August meeting that I asked to have removed. And then at that time, the Deputy Reeve and the CAO both said it must be put on the agenda, stating that it was an MGIA requirement. And at that same meeting, Reeve Link specifically referenced code of conduct, which is what this one's about. And I said that on September 3rd, when this was put on the agenda, if it was regarding another member of council, it wouldn't make it to the agenda. So when we received the September 9th complaint and it's not on today's agenda, I believe that's a blatant unfair process to not have the matter addressed to the agenda after the Reeve and Deputy Reeve insisted that the letter about me be on the agenda. This was even discussed, my letter was even discussed with the Reeve and Mrs. Armstrong prior to the August 13th meeting, and that's all a matter of public record because it's on the videos.
Which email? Is it an email you're talking about?
Went to all of council September 9th at 11:53 a.m.
Okay. Just having a quick look here and make sure the one you were talking about. Bear with me for a second. Question to administration, is this go through the proper channels?
Through the chair, so the email in question that has been brought forward was a code of conduct complaint from Leanne Tonks, and she said that this correspondence is a formal code of conduct complaint against Reeve Link, and so I did respond to Ms. Tonks the following day, the following morning, and just advised her of the correct process to follow to it. So
okay, and that was CC'd on all of council, correct?
Yes, that's correct. All of council was.
So we can definitely put it on the agenda and discuss the process of it. I have no problem with that. Because it's the code of conduct bylaw is clear of how things move forward, but we can add it as agenda item and discuss it at that time. Go ahead.
And I would ask how that's different from the Mrs. Armstrong's letter, which should have followed the same process, yet it didn't. It was put on the agenda.
So through the chair, from administration, I think that the two items were separate. The one was a letter to Reeve and Council. This is just an email. It's not addressed to anyone specifically. So I'd say there's a difference there. The other one wasn't a formal code of conduct complaint where there is a process. The other one was correspondence to council. So that's how administration treated these separately.
And just to be clear, you were under no direction from any council. You're following policy.
That's correct. So the administration is following the bylaw that's in place. So
Bylaw, sorry.
if there's correspondence that comes to Reeve and Council, it would come into the package. Administration has been directed by council to bring that topic to a future committee of the whole meeting. So this could be another kind of piece of it, but it's a debate of council for sure.
Okay. Well, let's, because I think it's something important to discuss the process, because some people feel that it's not fair. So we can go through the bylaw and how it works and make that clear. So we can add that to new business, would be 7.11. So it'll be emailed to council. Anything further?
Yes, administration has 3 items to add this morning. They're all very similar. So it's ACP grant resolution requests. They are from the villages. So just to provide council some context, the villages of Standard and Rockyford and Hazar have all requested a resolution from Wheatland County Council to support them in the ACP grant submission. I believe one of the criteria for the ACP grant is to have another municipality have a resolution. So the reason why they're added after the fact as an emergent item is that the correspondence from the Village of Standard was received on September 12th, which is after the publication of the agenda package. The resolution from Rockyford was, or the request from Rockyford was received yesterday, September 16th. The one from Hazar was received in August. However, after contemplation and after receiving the other two, administration thought it would be best for council to make that decision. And ultimately, administration has said to put all three, provide all three a resolution. And you'll find that in the addition package, and which is also circulated to council yesterday. So we're proposing to add those to agenda items 7.12, 0.13, and 0.14. Thank you.
I'll adjust the agenda because I screwed up, because you already had these 3 here. So the agenda will read as 7.11, the 1, 2, and 1, 3 for the ACP, and then we'll add 7.14 for the matter that was brought forward from Councillor Larson, sorry. Anything further? Motion to,
I'll move the agenda as amended.
there's a motion on the floor. Any discussion? I will call the question, and we're on Eastgrad. That's carried. Is there any notices of motion from council? Seeing and hearing none, we'll move on to bylaw reading 3.1, bylaw 2024-18, electoral boundaries bylaw, second and third readings. Welcome.
Good morning, Jessica Russell with Development Services, presenting bylaw 2024-18 to establish electoral boundaries in Wheatland County. This bylaw was presented at the September 3rd, 2024 regular council meeting for consideration of second and third reading. The bylaw was tabled to request an amendment to sections 10, 11, and 12 regarding the force and effect of the bylaw. The bylaw was amended and has been included in the agenda package for consideration. Please let me know if there are any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Go ahead.
Just curious, I can't remember seeing it, but do we have a breakdown of the population in each division? Approximate, I don't need an exact. I think it would be good for the public to see the final result.
Through the chair to council, yes, we do. They were included in the packages for the 4 scenarios, and then on the final selection that at committee of whole that council selected, and we can prepare those again for the public to be aware of what the population breakdown. I just don't have them before me at this
Okay,
time.
I think just put it on the website when you put this on.
Yeah, I believe it was at the open houses too. I saw it there, yeah. Any other questions? There's a couple motions if council wishes.
I'll move that council moves to amend bylaw 2024-18 in accordance with attachment A of the report.
There's a motion on the floor. Any discussion? I'll call the question. And that's carried. Go ahead.
I'll move that council moves second reading of bylaw 2024-18, this being a bylaw for the purpose of establishing electoral boundaries as shown on the attached Schedule A, forming part of this bylaw as amended.
Motion on the floor. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. Reeve Link, did you hear that I called? Oh, there we are. Just probably technical stuff. Okay. And that's carried. There's one more resolution if council wishes. Go ahead.
I'll move that council moves third reading of bylaw 2024-18 as amended.
Third reading is on the floor. Any further discussion? Call the question. Got to wait for Starlink to line up. I'll just give it another minute.
Through the chair, my internet is slow, but it does show voting in progress at the top, but the vote has not popped up. So I am waiting. My apologies.
If you click on voting in progress, the vote should pop up. That's what I'm being told.
Perfect. Thank you.
If not, we can go to a roll call vote too. No, we're good. That's carried. So we'll move on to item 3.2, bylaw 2024-28, Agricultural Service Board bylaw readings. Welcome.
Through the chair, good morning to everyone. This is George from administration, and here to present the ASB bylaw revision 2024. So a bit of background here is occasionally the Ag Service Boards require Wheatland County councillors members to attend ag-related conferences, conventions, and events beyond those pre-approved under the county's elected official remuneration policy. As a result of this, attendance at additional events by councillor ASB members must currently be approved directly by council. If council so desires, clause 8.1 of Wheatland County's Agricultural Service Board bylaw 2419 could be amended to more definitively delegate the ASB the authority to approve attendance at additional events, including the associated remuneration for councillor board members, by incorporating the following bylaw statement below. This may help streamline the process, and administration recommends incorporating the above clause into the ASB bylaw, facilitating easier approval of councillor attendance at ASB-related events beyond those specified in the current policy, which is the Agricultural Service Board Conference. I'm here for any questions.
Thank you, George. Any questions, discussion? Go ahead.
I'll just move that council approve first reading of the Agriculture Service Board bylaw 2024-28, and then we can have discussion.
Great. Motions on the floor. Discussion.
So I think it's a great idea. We do have a budget that we have to operate within. So I think if we look at the Ag Service Board goals to be responsive to current issues in trends in agriculture and increase awareness of environmental ag practices, we can only really do that by going to different events that are offered. For example, the Ag Smart Conference that a few of us went to. So there's other events like that that could be useful for the Ag Service Board. So I do support this. There was one thing I think on the bylaw, point number 12, just the repeal of bylaws. I think it would need to be bylaw 2024-19 is hereby rescinded. So I think that was the last version. That's the version that you've corrected or updated here would be 24. So it's a minor amendment. So if you're looking, it's on page 42.
So the bylaw number is incorrect?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that has to be done properly. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so just on paragraph or in section 12.1, so bylaw 2024-19 is hereby rescinded upon the passing of bylaw 2024-28. That would be we just had updated it. So does council wish to see that in text, or is council okay with that change just verbally?
For me, I think it's fine. We could approve it as amended, just with, it's just a, it's a
Very minor, yeah.
Councillor Larson, are you okay with that amendment? Okay. Any further discussion? Thank you for that. That's got to make sure you get the right numbers. If not, I will call the question. That's carried. Further motions?
I'll move that council approve second reading of bylaw 2024-28.
Motion's on the floor. Any discussion? I'll call the question. That's carried. Further motions?
I'll move that permission be granted to hold third and final reading of bylaw 2024-28.
Motion's on the floor for third and final. Any discussion? Call the question. It's carried unanimously with those in attendance. Final reading. Oh, please use your microphone. Thank you.
I move that council approve third and final reading of bylaw 2024-28.
Any discussion? I will call the question. And that's carried. We don't have any presentations or delegations, so we'll move on to consent agenda. This is I believe the second or third time we've done this, so if there's anything that we would like to pull out and discuss, now is the chance to do that. I believe we have a few items in there.
I'll move approval of the September 17, 2024 consent agenda as presented.
Thank you. Any discussion? I will call the question. And that's carried. We'll move on to new business. Item 7.1. I believe this was added by Reeve Link. Reeve Link, you have the floor.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve Clausen. This is based on a request from a ratepayer just to bring forward for council to consider providing shredding services. I'll present it to council and for consideration. Thank you.
So it's basically someone looking to do work for the county to do shredding, so they can direct that to administration under whatever contracts or whatever. Is that what you're looking at?
No, they weren't offering to provide shredding services. They were inquiring if the county provides shredding services to ratepayers.
Oh, okay. Thank you for the clarification. Go ahead.
I know that a lot of banks provide, or well, the credit union, I would say, in Hazard offers that service periodically. I think they have a shredding date that is published up. Yeah, yeah, I don't know if that's a duplication or.
Does administration have anything to follow up? Just
No, we don't provide that service. We do have a shredding company that doesn't shred county documents, but as for ratepayers, we don't. If council wants administration to inquire if this should be a municipal service, please feel free to direct us to do so. Thank you.
I know myself for the business that I've had for a number of years, I have to haul it into Calgary to shred it, because sometimes it's just so much, and there's a cost, but it's a business cost, so. I didn't know there was any free places to do it ever. I've always just paid, so. I know it's not cheap, but it gets done. Any other thing? How does council feel?
I don't know, for me, I think if there's an option somewhere in the county, I'm not sure. I don't know.
Go ahead.
Through the chair, just a bit of a comment on that. Of course, yeah, there is a cost to the county to do shredding, and you know, just for consideration as well. Obviously, there could be some liability involved in that. I know it just personally at home. I have a shredding little box thing, and you can shred it there, and then recycle it. But yeah, so just wanted to mention that for council's consideration.
Yeah, and when you take something to a private entity, I know you have to sign off on documents, and there's a liability issue you definitely have to sign off on. So for us to be assuming that liability would be a lot. So hearing there's no motions, good discussion. Reeve Link, are you satisfied with the discussion?
Yes, thank you. I didn't necessarily feel that it was like an appropriate service for municipalities to offer. That's great to hear from Councillor Priest. I wasn't aware that the Hazard Credit Union offered that, but that's good to know, and I will certainly pass that along as well. But just wanted to raise it for consideration, and I appreciate council's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. No action taken there, so we'll move on to 7.2, ratification of attendance at Reedy Lunch. And I'm sorry, I do not know what the acronym stands for. Go ahead.
I think you missed the ones that were added to the agenda. Are they not 7.1?
No, they are 7.11, so further down, so we're at 7.1.
Yeah, but you just wanted to move on to 7.2. Don't we have to do 7.11 and 1.2 and 1.3?
1.1 is actually 11, 7.11.
Oh, 7.11. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I didn't
No,
hear
It's
it
not
right then.
1.1 noise, yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
So we'll go back to ratification of attendance at Reedy. And I'm sorry, what's the acronym stand for? Does anybody?
Reconciliation. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Reconciliation Energy Transition, Inc.
Thank you for that. So on August 30th, I asked to have this on the agenda, so I'll speak to it. On August 30th, 2024, we were invited to, and I don't know if all of council was invited because we were not the invitors, but I do know myself, Councillor Priest, Reeve Link, and Councillor Eichert attended. Councillor Eichert and I actually traveled together, and we picked up our CAO as well to go to the attendance. There was the Joseph Scow was there. There was quite a few. There was discussion on the project and what they're doing, steps forward. The shareholders, would I say shareholders or partners, were there. The project within the county boundaries that Siksika has ownership and private entities. Is that a good way to describe it, Reeve Link?
Yeah, I would say that's accurate, you bet.
Okay. So there was a luncheon, some information sessions. So I'm just looking for ratification of attendance and mileage. I'll put a motion on the floor as such to have get mileage and attendance for this event for the councillors that attended. Motion on the floor. Any discussion?
I was just wondering if we want to consider in our remuneration policy to, even not today, but consider changing from groundbreaking events to just something like just events.
I believe there's something in there now if there's attendance with MLAs or there's something wording, but I discussed it with administration a little bit and we thought it best to bring this forward, so.
Yeah.
So it's not trying to hide anything, it's just what it is, so.
I think it's useful for us to go to events that we're invited to by potential businesses that could be developing in the area. It's good support, shows them that we're open for business and we're interested in having them here. So I would support the motion, and maybe at some point in the future we could consider looking at our remuneration policy to broaden the.
For sure.
So, because these are important events to go to, I think.
Would administration have any advice on when we could review that? Should we wait till after organizational meeting, things like that, or whatever the workload's like?
So administration's thought would be just to discuss the motion on the floor right now, and then if council does want to broaden it, broaden the motion, the second motion to revise that policy, then do so, just to provide clarity to council on what can and can't be compensated for meetings.
Thank you. Motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Go ahead.
Just curious on my own part, was there any other councils invited? I'm pretty sure I know what the meeting was about, who I was invited to, I just couldn't count.
We weren't privy to the invitation list, but I did see one councillor from Strathmore was there.
Okay.
I didn't see any from the villages, but again, it wasn't our event, so we didn't create it.
Not who was invited so much as who comes.
Yeah, for sure. Anything further? I'll call the question. And that's carried. And I just want to say something, like you had mentioned about these events where we go, possible development of the area. I always make it clear, and I think we all should, that just by attending, we still have the decision to make here and land use policies and things like that. So you got to be careful. It's a fine line. You want to find out some information, but you always have to have that seat. So it's a fine line there. So. Saying that, we'll move on to the Council Resolution Tracker 7.3.
Yes, good morning, Council. Brian from Administration. On page 61 of your agenda package is the Council Resolution Tracker RFD. On page 64 of the agenda package is the actual Council Resolution Tracker. So anything in yellow is deemed ongoing, anything in green is deemed complete by Administration. If there's any questions about the Council Resolution Tracker, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO Henderson. Is there any discussion, questions? If not, a motion.
I'll move that council accept the council resolution tracker dated September 17th, 2024 as information.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? I will call the question. That's carried. We'll move on to 7.4, 2024 Fall RMA Convention and a meeting with Minister Dreeshen.
Yes, good morning, Council. Brian from Administration again. On page 71 of your agenda package is the RFD for the meeting request invitation with Minister Dreeshen. So Administration did leave the 3 topics that Council may choose to list for Minister Dreeshen to attempt to secure a meeting with him. Administration did provide some topics of discussion on page 71 as well. What we kind of did was we listed them in order that we thought might be good for council to consider. So the overpass at Range Road 264 and the grant funding at the Muirfield Lagoon and the provincial support for Wheatland County accessing the East Calgary Regional Water Line as well. Topics 4 and 5 have been discussed with previous ministers, Minister McIver at the RMA convention when he was the Minister of Transportation. Of course, all are important items to the county. So if there's any questions about the topics or list of priorities, please let me know. Or if council would like to schedule the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. So before us is, first, do we want to schedule a meeting with Minister, which I believe we haven't met with Dreeshen before as the Transportation Minister?
To my knowledge, that's correct. We have not as a council.
So we should have that discussion first before we proceed down the road. Go ahead.
I think it's important to meet with the Minister of Transportation when you get an opportunity. But on topic number 3 there, it says that given that 87% was funded through the province grant system, Water for Life, would it be of some merit, because that line was sized had a capacity put to it about the water that was going to be used. And I think it was population based more than anything. So it wasn't just the population of Strathmore included in the sizing of that line. Population of Wheatland County was used in the sizing of that line. And that's how they come up with the sizing of the line. The government put in 87%, thought it was to be 90-10 is what they tried to shoot for. When it come time to sign the papers, Wheatland County wasn't getting any rural connections. They would do municipal connections, which they said was a settled thing, something like Gleason. And county didn't sign on. Our portion of the grant was $2 million, and the town of Strathmore picked that up. And they pretty well owned the whole pipeline, I guess, or paid our share, or I don't know what you want to call it, but we weren't getting any money, so it was going to be pretty hard to get any water, so we weren't putting any money into it. So I don't know if you want to put that in there, the sizing of the line was using county numbers. Because we had this other development at Eagle Lake too, looking for water. It wasn't just the east end.
I think administration would put together a package and send beforehand whatever we have. Because there's some agreements in place with the town, I understand, and things like that, but yeah. So I'm hearing from council that we want to have the meeting. I think it's important, especially with a minister that's taking over and we haven't had a chance to meet with them in that role. So I think it's important. So I think that's a given. I see a bunch of nodding heads. Reeve-Link, any comments?
No, I would concur with the comments made so far. I think it would be prudent to request a meeting, and I support the recommendations by administration and the prioritization, and would agree that a briefing note for councillors in attendance would be helpful as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eichert?
Yeah, I believe we should schedule a meeting with the Minister of Transportation. And I believe that the order of discussion on the points should be the 1, 2, and 3, that 1 and 2 being the most important, I believe, for the area. But I believe that the way you've got them itemized or prioritized, is probably the most important way to go. So yeah, I agree with it.
And item 4, I think is important to bring forward because we have talked about it in the past. I've been there a few times just to say, hey, like, you know, it's still in the queue, like what's happening. It's definitely the ratepayers in the area have issues with it. I don't believe anything's changed, still the same. So I think it's something, but it's, yeah. Go ahead.
I'd agree with the prioritization, but I wouldn't mind just mentioning to him that we are still, it's still on our minds, and I guess I'd be curious to ask them just what that queue looks like and how different secondary roads. I mean, there are so many secondary roads in the province, and I know some are worse than this, but how do you end up at the top of the list? That would be my question. And so that's maybe not these other 1, 2, and 3 are bigger, more bigger issues for our county, but I'd be curious to know just how it works from their side of things.
Go ahead.
And I would echo those comments, especially with number 5. We don't want to lose that. For example, 848 has been a bad road as long as I've been alive. And it's got the amount of oil field traffic, and since the advent of Google Maps, it's the shortcut from Calgary to Saskatoon, and the people are they're going, and they don't like that road because it's miserable. So then they take other county roads and then dust up people's yards. So I think we don't want to lose number 5.
Okay. So there's go ahead.
I think a couple of weeks ago, there was a news article, Alberta shipped record amounts of petroleum products last year, which broke a previous record that was set the year before, which another one was set the year before that. The new pipelines opened up and they're shipping more oil now and fluids than they have ever in the past. You don't hear about it much, but most of these roads are carrying fluids, heavy traffic and fluids. There are transfers from pipelines to tankers out there in your division. This record amount of product just doesn't come from the air. Those roads are getting more traffic just by nature of provincial activity, I think. Their increases are happening because of the impact of what's happening on our roads.
Go ahead.
And I'd just add to that, so specifically a concern with 569 too. When I said 848, I didn't mean to single it out, but all of those ones on there have the same problem.
Okay. Go ahead.
Just a point through administration, perhaps if council would be amenable to it, we could schedule for the topics of discussion section or points 1 to 3 and have administration follow up with our contact at Alberta Transportation's on point 4 and 5. Administration is very, and council would be understanding that the meeting is 20 minutes and either topic 1 through 3, you could probably talk to the minister about it for an hour each topic. So administration, if directed by council, we can definitely follow up on points 4 and 5 and then schedule for 1 through 3 and provide council an update on points 4 and 5. Thank you.
Thank you. Council's wishes. There's a recommendation from administration for a motion here. Go ahead.
I'll move that council direct administration to schedule a meeting with the Minister of Transportation and Economic Corridors at the 2024 Fall RMA Conference to discuss the following topics, 1 through 3, and I'll further direct administration to communicate with Transportation and Economic Corridors regarding 4 and 5 and bring that back to a future council meeting.
Thank you for the motion. Any discussion on the motion? Go ahead.
Also, when you're discussing the corridors, you can mention that we paved the Duck Lake Road to concentrate the traffic on a good road and get it off of some of the county roads. We are trying to help out, but we have limited resources.
Perfect.
Good point.
I will call the question. Still typing. It's okay. I called too early. We have lots of time. And that's carried. Move on to 7.5, Rocky View County RMA Resolution Seconder.
Yes, good morning, Council. Brian from Administration again. On page 75 of your agenda package is a resolution from Rocky View County requesting Wheatland County to be the RMA seconder of the resolution. This resolution is titled 2025 Municipal and Federal Election Dates. This is a topic that administration brought forward just as an information to the last council meeting. It was discussed during the CAO monthly report. This resolution will cover the kind of administration thinks would definitely bring it up to the membership, which is great. And then perhaps have some advocacy from RMA on this topic, which I think I had mentioned at the last meeting. We would most likely lean on RMA for guidance on this topic. The resolution starts on page 78 of your agenda package. And if there's any questions about this resolution, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? I believe it's because it's the dates same time, right? So.
Yes, so the municipal election will be scheduled for October 20th, 2025, and I believe that's the third Monday. Yes, it is the third Monday of October. That's how it's scheduled in the Local Authorities Election Act. And then just the way that the federal election is lining up, Potentially could go sooner depending on, the federal politics and how those play out. But at this point, the latest date that the federal party could call the election is the last date is October 20th. So it would just kind of line up. I don't think it would happen again, but just the way it is. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification on that. And mostly for people listening, so we're not trying to rig elections or anything like that. We're just making sure that it gives a fair democratic process and people have the ability to vote. So council discussion, I think it's good. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll move that Wheatland County second Rocky View County's Resolution 2025 municipal and federal election dates for consideration at the 2024 Central Rural Municipalities of Alberta District 2 Fall General Meeting and the 2024 RMA Fall Convention.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor. Discussion. Seeing none, hearing none, I will call the question. That's carried. This one, 7.6, I'm kind of, usually I recuse myself from these because because of pecuniary interest being the chair. Who do I hand the chair over to in this situation?
So the procedure bylaw, the chair would have to be in person. So any council member sitting at the table right now.
You have to accuse yourself. This is just a letter of support. There's nothing.
Well, in the interest, my interests are if it's a funding, which I believe it is. They're looking for funding, and because of a family is employed by this, I do feel that I should recuse myself. So.
But there again, I'm going to, is support for the Strathmore Handy Bus Association for a grant application. I mean, there's, in my mind, and I understand you have to make your own choices here.
Yeah.
But in my mind, this is just a grant application. We do not have any, like, there's no guarantee that the grant application will be up. So I can't see. In my mind, there wouldn't be one, but thank you.
Listening to what you're saying, there is no direct funding. It is for replacement of a unit, from my understanding. Unless I'm wrong. Do you? Sorry. Yeah, so, okay. Well, then I will just stay here and I will. So we are moving on to 7.6, Strathmore Handy Bus Association request for letter of support.
Yes. Good morning, Council. Brian again from administration. Page 80 of your agenda package is the Strathmore Handy Bus Association letter of support request for the Community Initiatives Program. So this is a program that they're looking to replace a vehicle for. The letter is attached to the report. Fairly standard practice for Wheatland County to issue these when they're requested. If there's any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. Council's wishes, discussion.
I'll move that council authorize the REEF to sign a letter of support for the Strathmore Handy Bus Association for inclusion in their Community Initiatives Program grant application.
Thank you. Motion on the floor. Any discussion? Call the question. That's carried. Move on to 7.7, encroachment agreement plan 03-11146, block 5, lot 15. Go ahead.
Good morning. I'm Suzanne Hayes, Development Officer with Wheatland County. Beginning on page 86 of the agenda package, we have a request for an encroachment agreement for 2 Speargrass Boulevard. Staff are recommending that council directs the REEF and CIO to sign an encroachment agreement with the landowner, permitting an existing fence to encroach 1.43 meters onto the Speargrass Boulevard right-of-way. Staff, oops, one second, page 91, we have the location plan indicating with the arrow there to Speargrass Boulevard. It is approximately it is on the northwest corner of the intersection of Speargrass Boulevard and Speargrass Boulevard South. You can see to the north of this parcel is all golf course lands. The property has been sold to a new owner who is concerned about an existing fence that encroaches 1.43 meters over the east property line. So we can see that on the next page, page 92. You can see over the east property boundary, there's a fence, and actually over the north property boundary, but that is not our land, so we are not concerned with that encroachment. So the County Transportation Department has reviewed the fence placement and states that the fence will not cause any operational issues and there are no concerns if it is to remain in place. Also that it appears to have been constructed in alignment with the golf course fence to the north, so that is most likely why it was constructed there, and that an encroachment agreement would likely be the easiest solution and protect the new landowner going forward. The agreement template in its entirety has been included as an appendix to this report. It's a standard template that we use, which has got clauses regarding the term and termination, removal, maintenance, risks and liability, insurance, and also that a caveat must be registered on title if the agreement is entered into. The county is granted the authority to issue an encroachment agreement under the MGA, the Traffic Safety Act, and the County Public Works Policy, which specifies that council is the authority for encroachment agreements for the municipality. And that concludes my presentation. Please let me know if you have questions.
Thank you. Questions?
Just on page 93, the photograph on page 93, the fence encroaches 1.43 meters. That's a continuation of the fence that's straightly, I would guess, to the north. There's a fence there that continues on through.
It appears to be that way.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one. How many times, like, I don't believe I've seen too many encroachment agreements in my time here. So this is not normal practice for us?
Our department didn't used to do the encroachment agreements. This is new for us, but I've only presented 2 so far, but we do them when it's required.
My concern with this would be, you know, I understand the fence is existing because of property changeover, but is it set a precedent for other people? Because you know, all of a sudden the neighbor says, well, I don't have that much room. That's just one thing we have to be aware of.
In my opinion, one of the factors that's pertinent is that if this fence was just encroaching and there wasn't that golf course fence to the north, it might be different, because some people did make that comment that, well, it's over, they just want more land, but because it's equal to the golf course fence the entire way, I think that puts a little bit of a different light on it.
And is the boulevard there, is it our land we look after, or is it the property owner like everybody else? Do we know? Like, are we cutting the grass on the outside?
I do not know the answer to that. We could probably find out if you would like.
Just curious. I don't.
Just triggered something. Would that mean that fence that's on the golf course straight north is actually encroaching also? Just that because no piece of property is being sold, there's no, the bank isn't requiring a
Correct.
exact where everything is.
And do they have an encroachment agreement?
Not that I'm aware of.
So this is a kettle of fish.
Mm-hmm. Council's wishes. Go ahead.
I'll move that council directs the Reben administrative officer to sign an encroachment agreement with the landowner of 2 Speargrass Boulevard, Lot 15, Block 5, Plan 031146, permitting an existing fence to encroach 1.43 meters onto Speargrass Boulevard right-of-way.
Thank you. Motion's on the floor. Any discussion? I will call the question. That's carried. We'll move on to item 7.8, Quality Management Plan Safety Codes.
Good morning, Council. Rachel Hanson-Beaton with Planning Development Services to present a request for decision for Council to approve the revised Quality Management Plan for Safety Codes and authorize the REEV and CAO to sign the document. A Quality Management Plan is required to maintain accreditation status with Safety Codes Council. Wheatland County is responsible for the administration and accreditation and the delivery of safety code services in compliance with the Quality Management Plan. The current QMP was adopted in 2019 prior to the adoption of the National Building Code 2023 Alberta Edition. To be consistent with the new edition of the Building Code, a revision to our current QMP is required. Some amendments to the QMP include reducing duplication and improving consistency, allowing 1 year rather than 180 days for some permanent inspections. This will reduce the need for extensions for some permits which require a fee. Updating the inspection requirements to allow for more flexibility with timing of inspections. In conclusion, staff are recommending that Council approve the request for decision for Council to approve the revised Quality Management Plan for Safety Codes and authorize the REEV and CAO to sign the document. Council has the standard 3 responses to consider found on page 104. Find it. This concludes my presentation. We do have members from the inspections group here to answer any specific safety code questions if you have any. Thank you.
I believe in our policy, though, we can't. Council would have to make the motion if we wanted to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just so council's aware, if we want to ask questions, we have to make motions to have them speak. So that's our policy. Council's wishes, discussion. Questions?
I got a phone call from a ratepayer. I thought maybe this would be the place to bring it up. And their story was, I'll just convey the story and we'll see if it's necessary. Family farm. A gentleman, tired from farming, subdivided his homestead. So he's got a house, a well, and a septic system, and he's got half a dozen old buildings on the farm. Now he wants to move to Strathmore and sell it. And the new buyer wants an ownership paper that's all in compliance. So some of the buildings need a variance, they're too close to the property line. And he was telling me that these buildings all need a permit now and need a development permit and need to be inspected. And I couldn't answer that. I thought I'd talk to staff, but we have the ones that do all of the inspecting. Is that necessary? Like an old granary, or I think our bylaw is 100 square feet. Yeah, so if a building's more than that, I don't know if skids make a difference or not, or if it's poles or if it's actually got cement foundations. I just couldn't give them an answer, and I thought, well, here's a good place to ask.
Sure. Through the Deputy REEV. For compliance reviews, we have to look at the setbacks and if a development permit is required or not. We don't look at the safety codes portion of that. So if they're not in the required setbacks, they would require a variance. We don't necessarily ask for an inspection of those buildings, just that they all have development permits if they're over the 100 square feet. If they're under and they are within the required setbacks, then they're fine.
So if these buildings were built before there was a county, do you still need a development permit?
No, then they would be non-conforming and senior to the land use bylaw. So we review the land use the land file and the land use bylaw. And then I have documents that go back as well when it was in the Calgary Regional. So it just depends on what year. If we have an old farm and you can tell that the house, I kind of use the assessments as well to see if, you know, if it says it was built in the 50s or 60s, then they wouldn't require permits. If we can get pictures that show that the other buildings were kind of built in that time frame too, then we can kind of put them in with that time frame as well. It just depends on what information is provided and what information we have in that land file. If that makes sense.
So what I'm hearing, if it can be proved that it can be grandfathered in, they don't even need to have a building permit, maybe a variance for encroachment on the
Yes.
setbacks? Or
Yes.
Not even necessary.
It depends. Like if the buildings are over the property line, like we can't approve compliance for something that's not in the property lines. If it's close to, or if the buildings are touching or too close, then I believe then a variance, we would request that as well.
Okay.
Yeah, but no building permits. We don't go that far with those.
Well, the individual was scared it's going to cost them $5,000 to get all the permits and stuff.
No, so
Unless they miss.
yeah, so usually in those instances, like we'll charge double the fee for not having permits in place. If something like that were to happen, a dwelling permit fee is $300, so it would be $600. We include all the buildings on the property. If it's an accessory building, then it would be $150, so double would be $300 for all of those. If a variance is required, then it's $250 on top of that.
Okay.
Thank you for that. And there's no difference between private residence, acreage versus farm. There's no preferential treatment. There's nothing like that. It is what it is. You sell your property, you have to make sure it's in compliance. And usually, from my understanding, it's for financial options. If you have a financer involved, if you buy a cash sale, it'll never come to us. If a financial bank is involved in any way, shape, or form, they do want that compliance. It's forced upon us, which is because I've seen it a number of times where we've had to get them. Go ahead.
Some of these acreages are zoned ag general, some are country residential, and there's probably a few zoned something else. I told them I don't think it makes a difference if what the zoning is. It's the use of the building that is more pertinent. Like if you got a small factory on your property making widgets for half of the country, that building is treated differently. But if it's on ag general or ag industrial or country residential, doesn't really matter. It's the use of the building. Okay.
And I believe they can set up an appointment with our development staff and they'll walk them through the process too. Sorry, Councilor Priest.
I just have a couple questions actually. So on page 161, by the way, I love the new formatting of the document. Makes it way easier to read it and work through it and find things. So I like that a lot. So 3.71 permit applications. It says the application must include the following information. It's got a list. About halfway down, it says include any further information that the permit issuer considers necessary. And that would include a site plan that shows the location of, should that be at the discretion of the permit issuer or should it be a requirement? Like, just.
Not sure. We do, like, if they need a development permit, a site plan is required and we supply the development permit with the permit. So, Nicole, did you want to speak to that specifically? Or how do we do that?
If council wishes to grant, sorry, through the chair, if council wishes to grant a member of the public permission to speak to council, they just have to give
A motion on the floor. Yeah, for sure.
It's under section 129 sub 1.
Yep.
Well, I don't know if it's necessary, to be honest. I think if you.
Don't let that process. If you want to hear, that's definitely put the motion forward. If you want that information and it helps you, it's not a big deal. It's just a process, right? So-
Okay, well, so sorry, I need to, I make a motion that council allows a member of the public to,
Allow a member or members of inspection group
the
to
inspection group to.
answer questions of agenda item 7.8.
I might have others as well, but yeah, okay.
Just a point from administration, it actually probably would be good because it could open the floor to other questions that
For sure.
council may
Yeah,
have. So
yeah.
I think it's a great motion. Thank you.
Okay. You get that? In my excellent words.
So motion that council allows members of the inspection group to answer questions under agenda item 7.8. Any discussion? I will call the question.
Should we say and other?
7.8 is the whole agenda.
Oh, I see.
Item, so
Okay, that's the
that-
agenda
it's
item.
not the-
Okay, I
yeah.
understand. Thank you. Yep.
Sure. I'll call the question. Just hang on a sec. Democracy in action. And that's carried. So process would be come to the mic if there's a question asked. Introduce yourself so we all know who you are, what you do, and then give us some feedback would be great. So you had a specific question, Councillor Priest?
So I don't know if you got that, and so it has to do with 3.71, which is up on the, maybe your screen or up there. So we have a list of items that the application must include, and then halfway down it talks about further information that the permit issuer considers necessary. And I wondered if that should be like a requirement or whether that is a kind of a discretionary item. If you have an opinion on that.
Okay. My name is Ryan Nixon. I'm the Director for Business Development and Innovation and the Supervisor for the Building Department with the Inspections Group. In regards to whether it should be the permit issuer, the term permit issuer also includes a safety codes officer. So they're not mutually exclusive. So the inspector can ask for more information where it's necessary. So the permit issuer inside of that, if they're missing information like a site plan, or if they need more information because the information provided raises questions, they can ask for that. So this would be fairly typical wording right out of the template from Safety Codes Council.
Okay.
So.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Another question that maybe you might want to just hold on for here.
Careful.
Sorry. So in the tables, we talk about Part 3 buildings, Part 9, Part 10. Should there be definitions included here? Because I don't know. Is it just me or do we all know what those are? I don't know.
Yeah, so those tables are referring to building code requirements. So it's referring to Part 3, Part 9, Part 10 of the building code. So maybe not everybody would be familiar with those terms, but because the tables are discipline specific, so the electrical tables refer to the electrical code, and same with plumbing and gas and private sewage, although that's part of the plumbing group there. You don't have definitions for those, but they are defined in the building code, and the building code definition, while not in the QMP, would be applicable because the document of the building code, or the one that's enforced, is cited as part of your scope of accreditation.
Okay. Is there some simple definition of what a Part 3 is, like just for my own?
So Part 3 buildings are essentially large buildings. Simple would be so more than 600 square meters, more than 3 stories in height, but there are occupancy classifications like high hazard or assembly occupancies that have lower area thresholds. But there is a table in the building code that says for different types of uses, there's area thresholds and numbers of stories, and they're more restrictive in high hazard or where you're grouping people together, and less restrictive in low hazard.
Okay. Sounds a little more complicated than just having a simple, yeah.
It's a
Okay, that's
running
fine.
scale. It's something we
Yeah.
spend a lot of time training inspectors to discern. So like I typically just tell people to call the office and we'll help you with that as best we can.
One more question. So on page 163 at the bottom, we talk about if there's an unsafe condition, we would not issue a PSR or close a permit file. Then at 3.7.8, it talks about a PSR will be issued when a permit is refused, suspended, or canceled. So just, can you talk to that? Just.
Yeah. So a permit services report closes a permit, and it can close compliant or non-compliant. So it could have minor deficiencies. So a typical example I would give of that would be like the handrail up the front 3 steps of your house. If it's not there at the time of final inspection, it's not compliant to code, but it's not worthy of any sort of like prosecution or orders, or like it's documented, you're aware of it. You have to make your own decisions of that. A missing handrail off of a 2nd-story balcony would be an unsafe condition, right? So you would need to do something like to restrict the door so it doesn't open more than 4 inches so that somebody doesn't go out there and fall 2 stories to the ground. The permit services report just says you can't close a file that has something that's an unsafe condition, and the field inspector would identify if something's unsafe. And then we would work with the county when we encountered any sort of unsafe condition to resolve that, or at least mitigate it to the point where it's only non-compliant and not unsafe per se anymore. So it's a minor enough infraction to a point where, yeah, it's not code compliant, but it's not a safety hazard to the general public. Permit refusal is typically only happens when we get applications that come in and we're trying to get more information so we have enough to issue the permit. And the applicant stops responding to requests for information. And so we try to, our standard process is within 2 2-week intervals. If we get radio silence, we would refuse that on residential, and within 2 months on commercial projects. We're a little more tolerant on commercial projects for timeline because they're just larger or more complexity and moving parts. But the biggest defining line in that is radio silence. If they're talking to us, then we're going to work with people. But the refusal is to try to make sure that they don't start work on a permit before they actually get the permit. That's the idea. And then they have a formal document that communicates back to them their permit was refused. And it's, again, not that they can't reapply, or they're not that they're never allowed to have a permit with a refusal. It's just what you sent in right now is insufficient. Suspension is a wonderful term that I've never actually seen used. So it technically exists, but I've never seen it done. So you could suspend a permit, but there's no formal process for how to go about doing that, and so we don't do it. Cancellation can happen for a number of reasons. You know, projects, people, you know, owners can run into financial restrictions on a project and abandon a project. And as long as it's abandoned in a state that's relatively safe and protects the public, then a permit could be canceled that way. But the permit services report documents those types of things and those types of either refusal, suspension, or cancellation, and what was done at that up to that point. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. One other one, 3.7.3. So that's up a little bit. That's at the top of 162. Terms and conditions of permit. A permit may contain terms and conditions that include but are not limited to. And you've got the first, let me see here. 3.73, requiring. So we've got the first one. So I'm just curious if the word "and" should be in there. We need the second two, is that correct? So the first one, like I just, is it and, or is it or is it, should all three be required, or? I'm just not clear about. So you need permission to
Yeah.
be obtained.
Yeah.
You need all three of them?
So we typically, like the terms and conditions in the QMP are kind of the general guidelines for terms and conditions that could be set. We have standard terms and conditions we set in working with the municipality, and we set them on all the permits. The QMP just allows us to have that discussion with Wheatland County to say, okay, we maybe need to modify those to address an issue. We've had a couple occurrences of an issue. We want to change the permit conditions to reflect expiry dates or something else. But this scope here is just defining what we can kind of, and it gives some guidelines to what those terms or conditions could be, but not limited to. The actual terms and conditions for each permit are actually printed on the issued permit. And the quality management plan is just saying we can set specific conditions in working with the municipality so that they show up on the permit. I'm not, and or to there, I think the main, I'll leave the grammar to somebody wiser than me on that. But the function of that scope is just to say, well, if we want to set conditions like everybody must, buy a Wheatland County flag and fly it on the front lawn. I'm not saying you would, but if whatever, that you can set terms and conditions on that.
I just thought the word maybe should be changed to or, but that would be up to.
Go ahead.
I'll just provide a little clarification on that because I've developed way too many of these. When you use a word where it says the permit may contain, then it's all optional. When it needs to contain something, the word shall is used. Those are legal terms that are used in documents like this. So what that says is that the permit might have any or all of those. It's not required. If it said shall, then it would be a different story.
So the word and makes me think that the last two things are co-joined. That you.
Just for clarification, so identification number or label to be affixed to the undertaking, and there should be or? We can change
I'm
that.
suggesting it, but I don't know if that's correct.
I would say just from a reference.
Or take the word out and just have the list, because you don't have and or any of the others.
Okay, we can do that.
How about that?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
that's okay. You're on the clock.
Page 165, I'm just, the no entry policy. It says, so I just want to clarify. In the no entry policy, the last line says, in the case of a final inspection, a no entry will be noted on the PSR and the file will be closed. So, yeah, I guess you actually maybe already described that with that a permit can be closed and not approved kind of thing.
It could be closed and not necessarily be compliant.
Compliant, that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying.
So
The final inspection and the file was closed. So the PSR would say that it's not in compliance or it's not.
So it would say no entry if it was in the no entry process.
Okay.
It was closed no entry. So it would follow the process for no entry with the initial inspection as well as the
Okay.
final notice no entry that gives someone essentially 60 days to reschedule.
Okay.
So
Okay, that's good. I just, yeah, now that we've talked about it, I understand that a file can be closed without being completed or in compliant. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and that's, yeah.
So just following on that, if it's a non-compliant commercial building, for instance, and the file's closed for whatever reason, how do they can't still operate? Because I've been in other municipalities that have non-compliant buildings for 20 years because the person refused to do anything and they've lived in that building. I just don't want
Yeah.
to set that up because we have a permit process.
Yep.
And if they're refusing to do it, if we have a chance to stop them before they just let it go on and on and on, because once they get in that loop, it's really hard to get them back.
Absolutely. And I would agree with that, with the caveat that it would depend on the nature of the deficiency, right? So, like, absolutely, we would supports holding that line on, say, fire alarm, fire suppression systems in things, safe exiting from buildings, those types of life safety requirements. If they have, I guess that we have temporary occupancies for minor deficiencies where we've worked with people where, say, like barrier-free access, one of the push buttons to get in isn't working at initial occupancy, but they want to open the building. We would typically look at a temporary for 30 days or 60 days for minor things where they're working on minor deficiencies. Again, temporary is with the intent that they get to compliance and to resolve it at that point, and we don't want to have to withdraw that. And typically when we get into temporary occupancies, we'll work with the fire service to develop a fire safety plan that has a fire watch. The fire watch is intended to be somewhat burdensome to encourage people to finish their project so that it does not drag out. But we work with the fire service to make sure that we're taking appropriate measures based on the actual fire risks that are present in that type of commercial entity. If we're just missing something very minor, like the push button's not working for some reason, we wouldn't necessarily hold up the absolute use of the building. We would probably allow it with conditions. We would assess them on a case-by-case basis though too, and that would be with the county, all of you together. If there's concerns about that, we'll obviously investigate those things to address any concerns that come out.
Okay, thank you.
This is just a technicality, I guess, but on page 169, the tables, each of the tables, so if you'll notice in the second box, we talk about new construction or blah, 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 with a value of less than 50,000. And in the next one, it's work over 50,000. So what if it is 50,000? Is that in the less than or is it in the greater than? So I think one of them should maybe say 50,000 or less. The first one probably should say with a value of $50,000 or less.
I won't argue with you on that.
How would you, if it came in exactly at 50,000, which one would you put them in, do you think?
If it came right in at 50,000, we'd train our inspectors to take a look at the scope of the project and say what they think would be the most appropriate classification of that. To say either this is either a minor enough work that it feels appropriate to slide it into the less than category, or this is maybe a little more involved. You're doing foundation, a whole, framing, floor, walls, and roof. We want to see this 3 times, and then to slide it up a category.
Okay. That's fair. I just did, it does occur through all of the tables, so I just point that out.
Would you like that changed, or is that answer okay?
I think it'd be better to have clarity personally, but.
Okay, we can change it to say work valued over 5,000, 50,000.
I think in the previous tables, it does say not more than 50,000. So then it's a little bit cumbersome to think about it that way, but it's more clear. I think it's more, not more than 50,000. So if it is 50,000, it would be in that one. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I know I'm such a picky person, but 4.15 miscellaneous inspections. I was curious about requiring a permit, a building permit for hot tubs and above ground swimming pools. Is that, I would think that would just be an electrical permit if it was hot tub, but is there building permit required?
So
I mean,
the electrical permit would deal with the wiring for those things. The building code is where they've chosen to stick the covering standards for pools and hot tubs, so the lids that are, as well as the certification for the manufacturer of the product. The building code just is far too convenient for people when they don't know where to put something. Stick it right in the building code.
so it has to do with the lid to a hot tub?
The lid for the hot tub, as well as the certification of the actual manufactured product. It has to be a CSA certified product, and that standards in the building code. It's not in the electrical code.
No more water troughs.
Really? No.
So,
That's what we live in.
yeah, unfortunately, I didn't put it there, but it is in the building code.
So that is a national safety code thing.
Hot tubs, so like, I know hot tubs specifically because I've done a lot of research on them, and I'm a big fan of my hot tub. So, but a lot of the regulatory requirements for hot tubs actually came out of Alberta. We had, back in the late 80s, about 6 fatalities in Alberta where you only need a few millimeters below the water to not be able to breathe, and a pump doesn't care. So like hot tub standards for manufacturer require at least 6 different intakes so that one person can't cover all the intakes and get trapped under the water, the baskets and so on. And the temperature regulates to prevent Legionella and different types of things from growing inside the water tubes. Those things are there because of those building code requirements. And the lid requirements are so that you don't get children walking across lids and going into, especially small children, because pools and bodies of water attract small children. And so the lid is supposed to be lockable or have a fence around it so that you have some control of access. You don't get somebody else's child coming in. Again, no one's doing it maliciously, but a control that keeps the small-ish children reasonably out of those areas without supervision. So.
Well, that's very helpful, actually. Yeah, I not considered that. One last thing.
Okay.
So on page 177, under the plumbing table, it says private sewage disposal systems. So 1 inspection prior to covering. And then in 4.6.5, talks about needing 2 for a soil-based treatment system. Is that a different kind of a?
Are we at the right spot here?
I'm not sure. What page again, sorry?
177 and 178. Okay. So the bottom in the table, it says you need 1 for a private sewage disposal system. But then 4.6.5, talk about soil-based treatment systems requiring 2 inspections. Just curious if there's a.
That would be an error. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
We had talked about changing the holding tanks to one inspection. I think maybe there was an error in that, so I'll make sure that gets fixed.
So in the table, you'll indicate 1 for a holding tank and 2 for soil-based. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Beautiful. That's all my questions.
Well, awesome. You found a lot of things that we corrected, which is good. Just one question so overall, like without going deep into the document, say Wheatland County decided that we like horse trough and we want to have water heaters there for people. That's our tradition. Do we have any power to say specifically that we like a certain thing? and we're not going to comply with this? Because I get asked this question all the time from residents. Why do we get this? Here's a chance where I can ask the question because there's a bunch of changes coming, and can I even say no? Curious what you say.
Okay. There's a number of facets to that question. I guess one is that, well, there is provision in the safety code side of things for variances or alternative solutions to say that you want to do something other than what the code would allow. Safety codes, alternative solutions, and variances are required to be equal or better to what the prescriptive code requirement would be. So if you want to use a horse trough feeder, or not feeder, a horse trough heater.
Water, yeah.
Yeah, for water, sorry.
Old-fashioned hot tub.
Yeah, hopefully not an old-fashioned hot tub, but for electrical sake and mine as well. But either way, if you want to do some of those kinds of things, it's not that you can't, but that we would look to make sure that the same level, minimum level of protection would be there. And if we want to provide something that's going to be unique within the county, there is provision for jurisdiction-wide variances or alternative solutions. But at the same time, the safety code's definition for that is equal or better. And the building codes are really designed, like building, plumbing, gas, electrical, private sewage. The codes are one of the things that they're trying to achieve is to promote consistent enforcement and rules from one jurisdiction to the next. So a contractor who lives on one side of a municipal line and works in both is playing by essentially the same set of rules. So that's one of the objectives of codes. So it's not that we couldn't get into those conversations, but I would normally urge caution with that because you want to try to avoid as much as you can from a construction perspective, having a lot of very unique construction requirements that only show up in your jurisdiction.
And I'll just briefly speak on this. Like, we're a county. 100 years ago, people were here. They got a section of land. They were told, go build a house. So they built it out of sod. 120 years later, we're telling them what your hot tub can be. So you have people that are still here and say, I've built this. Why do you care? It's mine. I get insurance for it. So, it's a great question because these are people that literally were told, you're off the train, go ahead, go build your home. And there was nobody there to tell them how to do it. If it fell on your head, but these are the same people that are here now. So it's interesting how we've evolved to this, and it's a blanket for everybody. So we have people that, they have rights. And I think Councillor Kester spoke to that too. Basically, they've built their home a long time ago. And so it's just wondering what power we have, that's all. And what input we have, because we don't sit on any of these boards that come up with these rules, so.
I'm not certain if I should respond to that or not, but either way, I'll probably say a few words,
and that's fine, if it's just something, just for the public to hear the discussion, right? Because we are elected officials, our job is to interface between public and bureaucracy.
Yeah, I would say, like, there's definitely historical precedent for, that they emigrated here from wherever, and they built, and they were given no instruction on how to build it, and they just built their home, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that by any means. But we also, part of that is, we also live in a culture where we have to print coffee as hot on cups. So I think that's a contributing factor, but also the homes that we're building today are a far cry from a sod home. We build homes that are plastic sealed bags that need to be able to exchange the air at a certain rate to maintain indoor air quality. So the occupants aren't exposed to molds and mildews to get sick building syndrome or other things like that they just aren't aware of, the hazards that they could run into. And that's just from the building code side of things, like private sewage and how you dispose of your sewage. If you don't dispose of it properly, it makes the neighbors sick, which if they may or may not realize that right away. There's electrical, plumbing, and gas safety issues, and the homes we build today are far more complex systems that are integrated across disciplines than a sod home that you were building a fire in and just trying to not die from -40. But we do live in a part of the world where the weather tries to kill you 6 months of the year. So you need shelter. So there's, it's an ongoing conversation. And it's something that we work really hard to at Inspections Group. I know Tim's itching to. That's okay.
No, it's.
You can come up if you want.
Yeah, you should introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Tim Roski. I'm the CEO of the Inspections Group. Actually found it quite humorous when you said it. So we're gonna just cut to the chase on hot tubs. You can do whatever you want. You're gonna be plugging in I know I got horses, you're gonna be plugging in your heater. I'd recommend some sort of grate so you don't sit on it because it does get a little hot in the water. What I'm gonna say, you can do whatever you want. You could build a sauna out of a plastic shed if you want. Stick a heater in there and pour water over it, have a steam room. The one thing you won't be able to do is, okay, I'm gonna call for an inspection and ask for the inspection's blessings. That's it. So you can have your hot water tank, or you can have your hot tub. You can have whatever you want. If you want permission to say, okay, it's code compliant, you have to go through a system and you're gonna have to get the hot tub certified, which you never will. But as far as whatever you wanna do, nobody's gonna tell me I can't do that in my own backyard either. So that would be the lowdown on it. If you want it approved, there's certain things you gotta do. If you just want, go ahead and do it, plug it in. I'd recommend you plug it into a ground fault receptacle. Just on the safe side.
For the record, I still have the old coal style. When you put the coal in there,
Oh, then, yeah. And like I said, I've dealt with the certification of hot tubs. Yeah, it's not gonna wash, but I like your idea.
No, thank you for that, because that, for people listening, that basically clears it up. Like, if you really want to do it, you can, but you won't get
If
into.
you want us to approve, we have to go by the book.
Yeah, no, I'm good with that. Thank you. Thank you for humoring me in that discussion. Any further questions? Recommendation from administration. Go ahead.
I'll move that council approves the revised quality management plan for safety codes and authorizes the Reeve and Chief Administrator to sign the document with the amendments that have been agreed on today.
Thank you. Motion on the floor. Any discussion? I'll call the question. That's carried. Thank you very much for giving us some information. We have a request for a break, so we will come back at 10:45. Work for everybody? Welcome back, everyone. We're on September 17th, 2024 council meeting. Resuming, we're on item 7.9 ASB draft project funding policy. And I believe Mr. Bloom is here to speak to us again. Welcome back.
Through the chair, thank you for having me again. Today, or again, I'd like to talk about the ASB project funding policy. So at the July 3rd, 2024 Agricultural Service Board meeting, we had a resolution passed, ASB 2024-07, that the board accept the draft project funding policy and direct administration to present the policy to council for approval. So the ASB currently does not have a policy for project funding. Instead, we have traditionally been relying on the terms and conditions outlined in every grant agreement. And this policy is recommended for transparency to ensure fair allocation of resources with clear guidelines. Implementing a project funding policy will strengthen Wheatland County ASB's ability to support sustainable agriculture, enhance community resilience, and allocate resources effectively. I'm here for any questions.
Thank you. Questions?
I would make the motion that council approves the Agriculture Service Board project funding policy as presented. I do have a couple of little comments. So in the list of grant funding programs available, it actually would be the Wheatland Environmental Stewardship Program. And under eligibility, I would actually remove the complete and signed application forms. I think that's kind of a given. And in the next one, I wondered, this is a topic for discussion here, demonstrated significant value and benefits. Significant to me puts people off, that they don't think it's good enough. And I wonder, like, I think we do have a tricky time sometimes with our environmental awards program, just people don't feel that it's worthy or whatever, but I think so demonstrated, if we just said projects that demonstrate value and benefits to the environment, or however we want to say that, but I don't like the word significant personally, but I don't know how people feel about that on the table here.
Some suggested amendments. How does council feel about that? Silence means we're okay.
One other quick thing, in the first line and the purpose, that first comma can come out. It's not necessary there. That's all.
Thank you. For
So I guess can I just change my motion to say that council approves the Agriculture Service Board project funding policy as amended?
Absolutely. Amended as per discussions here?
As per discussion.
Yep.
Yeah.
Motion on the floor. Any discussion on the motion? I will call the question. And that's carried. We will move on to.
Thank you, George. That's great work. I did want to say that too, that appreciate the work that went into it, and it's good to have a policy.
I imagine you'll be here for the next one. Item 7.10, glyphosate letter of support. Go ahead.
Through the chair, George from administration here again. So at the July 3rd Agricultural Service Board meeting, we passed a resolution that the board forward a request on to Wheatland County Council to consider sending a letter regarding prohibiting glyphosate. So on July 18th in 2024, the letter was sent from the Wheatland County Ag Service Board to the Honorable Ministers Mark Holland, Lawrence McCauley, outlining concern of the private members bill C-287 prohibiting glyphosate. I'm here for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
Just a comment, so the ASB did send the letter, and I did receive a response back from, and this will be in the ASB package for our upcoming meeting, but on behalf of Honorable Mark Holland, Minister of Health, I did get a letter, and I'll just, I would like to reassure you that PMRA's #1 priority is to protect the health and safety of Canadians and the environment. We are committed to ensuring that decisions on pesticides remain evidence-based and transparent. An extensive scientific reevaluation of glyphosate completed in 2017 showed that under the established conditions of use, glyphosate does not pose unacceptable risks to human health or the environment. He goes on, or she goes on actually, it's important to note that a private member's bill, like all bills, must undergo the full legislative process, including being passed in both the House of Commons and the Senate, in order to become law. So that just is their response, but I think if council wanted to send another letter just to reiterate that we're watching, that might be a helpful thing.
Thank you. Was there a motion? I don't think there was yet.
Oh.
Okay.
No. I'll make the motion that council send a letter of support to the Honourable Ministers Mark Holland of Health Canada and Lawrence McCauley of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada to advocate for the appropriate permitted use of glyphosate in agricultural applications. Motion on the floor. Any discussion?
Just want to ask, the word permitted, is it permitted right now? Like, do you have to get a permit for well, you have to do an applicator's course. So by saying permitted, are you opening yourself up to something?
My understanding is you can buy glyphosate at the store. So I don't think you need an application. You need a pesticide certificate as a farmer to spray large, like to mix it yourself, I believe.
I just think take
George
out
has a-
appropriate use and take out the word permitted, because you could open yourself up to needing a permit to apply that. Go ahead.
Part of the
Your microphone, please.
certification is permitted uses. Part of their certification is permitted uses, and you have to use it as on the label. Every jug comes with permitted uses. There are very strict uses, and you don't, if you apply it out of scope, you're leaving yourself open to liability. So
Like
by
grazing
taking out,
restrictions.
yeah, if you take out the word permitted, you're in a way saying people can do what they want, same as the previous guy. But if you want to do it legally, you have to do it the right way. And I think for any chemical use, especially Roundup, we don't want to start advocating do whatever you want. You do it the permitted way.
Okay.
Permitted uses are very stringent. Different companies you sell grain to have additional restrictions, and they take the malting industry. They don't want any Roundup sprayed on any of their products. It looks bad for beer commercials, I guess.
Yeah.
But you can't, in the outline of the chemical, you can use Roundup, but the company won't buy it from you if they detect Roundup on the seed. Does that make sense? They can have their own higher standards, but to feed it to whatever the use, the guy buys it, knows it's for Roundup, he accepts it, fine. Right? So I'm not in favor of taking out the word permitted use. That's makes it a different animal altogether.
Go ahead.
I was just going to add, there's different things that grazing restrictions is one. Or if you're going to use glyphosate for weed control or a desiccant, there's different, you have to put different rates and stuff on. So you don't want to take that out.
Great, thanks for the explanation. Motion's on the floor. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. That's carried. We'll move on to 7.11. We have the series of support letters. The first one is ACP grant resolution for the Village of Standard.
Yes, good morning, Council. Brian from administration. So maybe what I'll do is I'll just kind of, they're all kind of related to the same topics, just one resolution per grant application that has been requested by the villages. So they were added after the agenda. Just as noted, the dates that they were submitted, with the exception of Azar, they did submit it ahead of time. However, just administration second guess ourselves and realize it probably should come to council for consideration. Ultimately, we do suggest providing 3 resolutions to support their grant applications. This does not commit the county to any funding. It's just a requirement of their grant application. So it was emailed to council yesterday electronically at 3:35 p.m. and all councils here present have a hard copy. If there's any questions about any of the grants, realistically, it's just a resolution that is required from the villages by the county. And all 3 resolutions have been provided for council. If there's any questions about, I guess, any report, maybe just bring them up as the report comes forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we're on 7.11, and there is a motion, appropriate motion for that one as an addition to the agenda. Any discussion, or anybody want to put a motion forward?
guess maybe discussion about it. So for the Village of Standard, it seems like their expected project outputs, there's a few of them. So recreation, parks, water, wastewater, stormwater, transportation. So are each of the, so if they get a grant and have the work done, each of them would be catered to what they're looking for? Because I think Hazard is looking just more at water and wastewater, and I'm not sure what Rocky Ford, their focus was. I don't know, didn't really say they had a specific plan for what they wanted to look at. Is it just general, or do they specifically, does each village specifically identify different areas they want to look at, or how does that work?
Through the deputy reeve to council, each of them, I believe it was written from the same consulting firm, were basic general information of collecting their current data of the infrastructure and all of that. So what they were looking for are the current systems, what's the condition, do they need to be replaced, upgrade, and then do an asset management plan that would work for both. And it is for each village, unique to what is within their jurisdiction, but it would be also what spills out a little bit into the county, hence why they were looking at it as a collaboration grant. And with the exception of the one, as you mentioned, Standard, the Village of Standard's also looking at doing a regional recreation infrastructure study.
Any other questions?
And the results of the studies then, if they say they need a bunch of upgrades of infrastructure, what's our obligation?
Through the deputy reeve to council, it will come back, and they call it a framework roadmap, whichever terminology they'd like to use, but it will come back, and there are things, whether it's their asset or anything that might be a county asset, and it would have to be an agreement on our part with the village, either through an intermunicipal collaborative framework on a service agreement or any upgrades. But the obligation for this is not to do the work, but just to have the work done to see what improvements. And on one of the villages, they wanted to look at a method of doing an asset management for a 10-year capital plan, and then it could incorporate into the county's plans as well if it impacts the county.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or motion?
I'll move that council moves to support the joint Alberta Community Partnership Grant application submission with the Village of Standard for services to prepare a regional infrastructure master plan and regional recreation and infrastructure master plan.
Thank you. Motion's on the floor. Any discussion about the motion? I'll call the question. Wondering if this is a directive from, like, I'm going to say AUMA because that's what they were used to call, but to give lots of these because they're all doing the same thing. I think it's great work they're doing. That's carried. But it's good to have an asset management program and develop that, know what you have and how fast it's wearing out. So we'll move on to 7.12, ACP grant resolution request, Village of Hazard. Basically the same thing. Go ahead.
I'll move that council supports the joint Alberta Community Partnership Grant application submission with the Village of Hazard for services to prepare a regional water and wastewater infrastructure management study.
Motion's on the floor. Any discussion on the motion? I'll call the question. Need some elevator music. Tom, start singing. And that's carried. We'll move on to item 7.13, ACP grant resolution request for the village of Rocky Ford.
I move that council moves to support the joint Alberta Community Partnership grant application submission with the village of Rocky Ford for services to prepare a regional infrastructure master plan.
Thank you. Motion is on the floor. Any discussion on the motion? I will call the question. That is carried. We'll move on to the addition, 7.14, an email that Councillor Larson brought forward. I've thought a little bit about this, and I just want to kind of give my notes of how this works. So if someone puts an email to council, that doesn't go to the agenda. It can, if a councillor so chooses to even send an email to administration and say, I'd like to add this to, and I'm speaking online, please. But we can add it to the agenda. That's the process. If a letter, even council, signed letter, not an email, it can be scanned as an email, but if it's a letter, it has to come to us. Is that basically the best way to say it?
So through the chair, my general thought process is that if it's addressed to Reeve Council and it's a topic that should be discussed at a future council meeting that hasn't been addressed, then it should come forward to Reeve Council. So there are emails from time to time that I do get and we provide to Reeve Council for deliberation. This one we did respond, and it wasn't addressed to Reeve Council. It was just like an email without any formal salutation. So to me, it didn't really meet the criteria. However, of course, if there's a topic that wishes to be discussed by council, council can add it at any time. Thank you.
And with our new code of conduct policy, and with the sorry, the word's eluding me, integrity commissioner, the policy is we do not file, council does not file code of conducts in this room. If someone wants to do that's an individual choice, they go straight to the integrity commissioner without our knowledge or input. And if they do that, that is what administration directed them to do. Anybody can do that. And I think that was brought forward here before at council. We had a discussion about it. It was really not that we don't do that. It's you have an issue, you get a hold of the integrity commissioner directly and it moves forward. I don't know if that clarifies anything for you. Go ahead.
So you're going to have to explain to me, first of all, the email is addressed to the Reeve Council, courtesy copy to the CAO. So I would say that's a fairly formal address. But you're going to have to explain to me how this one's different than the Armstrong letter that you decided to discuss in public. It doesn't meet the criteria for the code either as informal or formal. A discussion was had with Mrs. Armstrong and the Reeve as to how to go about this, and they decided they wanted it on the agenda. So you're going to have to explain to me how this is any different, because I don't see the difference.
Through the chair, if I may.
Go right ahead.
So the previous correspondence that is being referenced that was included in the council package, when that was first sent, it was physically dropped off at the county office, if I understand correctly. I don't necessarily delineate physical correspondence versus email. I think we can address them similarly, but that's just some historical context for that correspondence. I was initially unaware that that was dropped off at the county office. The correspondent did reach out to confirm that the correspondence was received. I was unaware of the correspondence, so I did reach out to CAO Henderson to confirm whether administration had received the correspondence. Administration verified that that correspondence was received. I then, I had also asked the correspondent if they were comfortable sharing the content of the letter that they had dropped off at the county office. They indicated it was a letter outlining some concerns regarding conduct during council meetings by a councillor. I then outlined the code of conduct bylaw and that we have updated that. I wasn't sure if the correspondent was aware of that. Excuse me, my apologies. The correspondent indicated that they were aware, and I outlined that a code of conduct complaint needs to be submitted to the Integrity Commissioner. The correspondent indicated that they did not wish to file a code of conduct complaint, that they wish to express their concerns directly to council. And I won't get into narrative around that, but I have heard concerns from ratepayers about the lack of action by the Integrity Commissioner regarding conduct during council meetings. However, our Integrity Commissioner has been clear that we should be utilizing our procedure bylaw and basically self-disciplining during council meetings. Failing that working, the Integrity Commissioner has indicated they would contemplate consideration of code of conduct complaints regarding violation of the code of conduct during council meetings, but he has indicated all of council has received correspondence regarding that. That correspondent did confirm that they would like this as correspondence. I have endeavored to, when we do receive, I also endeavor when it's an email to Reeve and council to forward that to administration to be included. There's multiple examples previously, some around, highly contentious decisions council is contemplating, some expressing concerns about council's decisions or individual councillors' positions. Those have been included in council packages. Administration puts them through the FOIP process for confidential information under FOIP, and they have been published as well. What delineates, or what I'm assuming delineated the most recent correspondence for administration, I'm assuming is because it literally starts, this correspondence is a formal code of conduct complaint, and it was against myself. I believe administration acted appropriately in outlining the updated process for addressing code of conduct complaints to the Integrity Commissioner. That seems to have been received by the correspondent, and there was some further back and forth between administration and the correspondent regarding a FOIP request, and all appropriate information was provided by administration. I have received other inquiries regarding code of conduct and gone through the same process, indicating to individuals that they need to send their code of conduct complaint to the Integrity Commissioner, and that the Integrity Commissioner will facilitate that. Part of the reason that we moved to that process was to basically remove that burden from our administration of facilitating the code of conduct complaint process. And so that's why that correspondence, why correspondents who are sending code of conduct complaints get directed to use the process with the Integrity Commissioner. It helps keep our administration neutral, specifically because code of conduct complaints are addressed regarding councillor behavior, and the CAO is, of course, council's sole employee that we're responsible for. And so my recollection is that council felt that it was important to sort of maintain the CAO's neutrality and have an objective third-party Integrity Commissioner facilitate that correspondence. So that's the delineation there, is that the initial correspondence that was referenced was specifically identified as not a code of conduct complaint. It was the way it was communicated to me as it was concerns, and that there was very specific direction that they wanted that addressed to Reeve Council. And the way that I interpreted this when I received the email was that it was specifically a formal code of conduct complaint, and I believe administration followed appropriate bylaws, which is our code of conduct bylaw, in directing them to file that with the Integrity Commissioner. I believe we do have a previous motion directing administration to put an agenda item on our next or on an upcoming committee of the whole meeting. I can't recall the specific resolution, but I believe it was to refer that to a committee of the whole for further council discussion, and we can clarify if there are other considerations that council should be taking in addressing correspondence. Thank you.
Thank you. Does council wish to do any further action?
I just agree that we need to have a further discussion at a committee of the whole to clarify. I feel like administration's in a bad position here of having to try to decide or trying to make a call on things. We get other correspondence from people, resident ratepayers who have comments to all of us. Those aren't necessarily included in our correspondence either. So I don't know if something that if one of us saw something we wanted to have included on the agenda, maybe that's how we need to address it. I'm not sure, but I do see that there is other correspondence we get that is addressed to all of us that isn't necessarily included, and nor do I think it should be. So yeah, it definitely needs more conversation for sure.
And I believe we do have that on a future agenda. How long is the Integrity Commissioner under contract for? Is it yearly?
Yes, through the chair. It's I believe it's 4 years. So I think at the next election, after the election, they appoint the new council would appoint an Integrity Commissioner at that point.
Yeah. And I think council chose because it takes the decision making. We have to work with our colleagues, and during this, and if it's that person or that entity fleshes out those and sees how they work. And if it's not working, we have to look at that point in time or before. We can do that too as council, but so no, don't see anybody wanting to do any action on this. Go ahead.
Still doesn't answer the question as to why it was decided that Mrs. Armstrong's letter should be discussed at a public meeting when the proper, if the proper way to deal with the one that we're talking about today was to do it as it was done, why was that not the proper way to do it before? And I don't expect an answer to my question. I'm thankful I'm familiar with George Orwell. How's that?
Okay. So, anything further? If not, I will, anything on the agenda left? I didn't miss anything? No? We're good?
Just the closed session item.
Okay. I will move us into closed session as per FOIP Act 24. Sorry, I don't have the agenda in front of me. Motions on the floor. Any discussion? I will call the question. And we're going to stay in this room, so Reeve Lincoln just stay on the line. Okay. And that's carried. Thank you, everyone. We'll resume council at 11:41 after the closed session. Action taken from closed session. Go ahead.
I'll move that council authorize administration to proceed with the removal of structures on roll numbers 277-0164, 277-0192, 277-0195, and 6128000, subject to the county retaining property title prior to demolition and not to exceed a budget as discussed in camera, to be funded from the Abandoned Structures Reserve and unallocated surplus.
Thank you. Motion on the floor. Any discussion on the motion? I'll call a question. And that's carried. Any further business? Not, I will conclude this meeting. Meeting is adjourned.